All right, call the meeting to order. Roll call. At large Cummins. Ward 2 Helm.
Yes.
And Ward 3 Johnston.
Here.
Okay. And for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next agenda item is approval of the agenda.
I move to approve. Second.
So motion by Johnston, seconded by Helm.
Helm,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Okay. Communications. Is there anybody from the public here that would like to address the council? Doesn't look like it, but I'll make an assumption. No? All right. We'll move on to city business. So the only item on the agenda under city business is just this discussion only for the fiscal year 24-25 budget.
Yes. Okay. So tonight we are going to talk about two versions of the budget that are being presented to council. I'm going to explain those versions, what other significant budget changes that have happened since the last time we did the budget and how that's impacted the revenue as well as the process of the budget. We'll start with our current tax rate, which is 16.892. Both the budget scenarios that are being presented have a decrease in their tax rate. Option 1 has a tax rate of 16.365 and option 2 has a tax rate of 16.136. So option 1 is, it refers to the Hinson study. The Hinson study's goal was to look at wages of similar sized communities and entities and try to close the gap as much as possible between us and them. It also was to try to encourage and retain our employees as well as fill our vacancies. Option 1 has an accelerated scale for gas, electric, police, and ambulance. So the full Hinson study that was presented from him is adopted in option 1. Option 2 shows an increase in all city employees' wages from their current wages plus 5%. So everyone would get a 5% increase from their current wages. The 5% increase has an overall lower financial impact to the budget. So the excess funds could be put towards general fund CIP items that are larger and take longer to save for, such as a garage for the police, library has a roof and potential boiler replacement that will be coming up, and then potentially a green space project in the future. So we could utilize those funds in that CIP. Option 2 would still have an accelerated scale for gas and electric, but it would not have one for police and ambulance within the general fund. As I mentioned earlier, there were some major changes. Some of those changes were the result of the House File 718. And I'll go into those in a little bit, but one thing that has continued and been in our budgets that we've had to deal with was something called a rollback. So the rollback is an assessment limitation that suppresses the amount of value that we can tax on a house. So for instance, if a house, our current rollback is 54.65%. So a house that's assessed at $100,000 gets taxed, we get the taxable value of $54,000. The rollback for the upcoming year is going to be 46.34%. So at our budget training, they talked that that's the largest decrease in a rollback percentage that they've known about. So that's a huge major financial impact because that's that much less revenue that's coming into the general fund to support those departments. So I've included in your budget highlights that you've got other impacts that and tax credits and stuff that were in that House File 718. One of the ones that was the most impactful to us is the consolidation of a set of levies. So we used to be able to, in addition to the 810 levy, we could utilize an emergency levy. So we were maxed at the 810, and then the emergency levy also brought in an additional approximately $32,000 into the general fund to help support those departments that are not revenue generating. The state consolidated that into that new consolidated general fund levy. So now we don't have use of that. So by fiscal year 29, the state's goal is to bring everyone in that new consolidated levy to 810. So currently ours is 8.12. So by fiscal year 29, no matter where a municipality is, everyone will automatically be reduced to 810, which is additional reduction in revenue. So if you pull out the state forms that I have in your packet, you'll be able to see that consolidated general fund levy that I'm talking about. You should have two different versions. One is for the full scale and one shows the 5% for everyone. Just to go over a couple other levies that we are able to utilize that did stay was the debt service levy, which allows us to utilize to levy for our debts so that we can make our payments. We also utilize the liability, property, and self-insurance costs. We were told that this is estimated to go up about 15%, and this is for our city insurance, for our buildings and workers' comp and those type of things. This premium increased across all budgets, but we're able to levy for the general fund amount for these expenses. We also have, we are charged a EMA assessment fee annually, so we can utilize the support of local emergency management to offset that cost. We can use the FICA and IPERS to offset the cost of the general fund from the employees for the employer's share of that cost in the general fund. And then we utilize the other employee benefits levy, which is the employee's insurance. We were told that that's estimated to go up about 5%. We did hear from our insurance guy, and he thinks it's definitely going to be within that, not over. So that is encouraging to know, but we're able to levy then for the general fund portion of those expenses as well. So then going back to budget option 1 and 2, if you look at budget option 1, the full scale tax levy has it at 16.365. So for an assessed value home of $100,000, that would be a reduction in that residence cost of $164.73 since the tax rate is going down from where it currently is. If you look at option 2, the 5%, that would reduce that same assessed value home of $100,000. It would reduce it down to $175.38. So there's about a $10 difference between the two for a valued home of $100,000. As a reminder though, talking about this for assessed value, that's just the city's portion. When you get your tax statement, obviously there is the county and the school included in there. And you'll see that when the auditor mails out the tax statements, they'll have each individual on them that'll come in March. Are there any questions about the levies or the tax statements? Okay. If you want to pull out then, it's called the debt sheet. This is just more of a visual document that we have that outlines all the debts that we have within the funds, by general fund, by water, utility, wastewater, storm. You can see that in the future years, we did have some debt fall off in the general fund as well as the wastewater. We paid off the old Sager debt, so now we just have the one Sager debt, which is nice, except that payment has ballooned up to the 603. So it's just a good visual document to kind of see instead of seeing it on paper, you can kind of see it visually across.
No, you're fine.
Okay. One thing to note about this though is this is a good visual thing to know when we have major projects coming up, to be able to see when a debt falls off and when it would be a good time to add in an additional debt. So it's just for reference if you ever want to pull out the debt sheet. The other sheet then, if you want to pull it out, is the TIP sheet. And may have seen this, some it might be new, but this is what we presented to council in November when we did our TIP indebtedness report. And it's just an internal document again that shows the TIP projects we have and what the timeline for those are and the estimations of what our TIP claims will be then moving forward. The thing to note on the bottom is we like to keep that TIP claim pretty level so it doesn't impact the schools significantly. So are there any questions about either of those? Okay. Going into pilots. So pilots are payment in lieu of taxes. The Department of Management has encouraged pilots to stay pretty consistent and level throughout the years. Our pilot for both scenarios would be 6.75%, which is the same as it is currently in our current fiscal year 23-24 budget. So that did not change. The next thing we can talk about is the CIPs. So that is a capital improvement plan that is in each budget. This is the 5th year that we've had them in the budget, and the goal of the CIP is to try to identify any reoccurring projects or expenses that can be saved for, and to help show council then what the vision and game plan is for those projects, so they can see it in the future too. So we try to keep those consistent and not changing drastically year after year. All items in the CIP, though, that would be approved in this budget are still required to come back to council for official approval of each individual item in the future, in the budget year it happens. So even if it's in this budget, it's still got to come back just to make sure costs are in alignment and nothing significant has changed since the approval of the budget. But it does give a vision of what's to come. Does anyone have any questions about any of the proposed purchases in the CIPs for the departments? If there are none, then I will move on to the departments. I mentioned that I looked at what departments went over the 5% in expenses. 4 of those were related just to personnel increases. The others, fire was related to vehicle repairs. Specifically, the aerial is due for a 5-year inspection. So that was the reason. Sidewalks operating expenses increased in that budget, and so that was brought into alignment from prior years. The rec program increased due to some technology increases, as well as insurance on the city vehicle. And then AAU swim and adult rec had the same operating supply increases, which was just to bring it into alignment from actuals from the prior year. Aquatic Center had increases due to concession stand fees, and then credit card fees as well to bring those into alignment. Looking back, when we put the numbers in, we try to look at the actuals from the prior 4 years so that those are the increases to bring it more in so it's not underfunded. Finance and administration had an increase in the 4th of July fireworks to try to help increase that cost. Road use tax, we have North Plum planned in there, so that is the cost of that. Wastewater, I mentioned earlier, we paid off the SEGR. We had 2 simultaneous SEGR debts. The one has been paid off, but the current debt, the payment ballooned, which we knew it would when the first one paid off, so that was the increase for that one. Gas had an increase for their gas purchase line to bring that into alignment from actuals of prior years. The airport is planning for a possible federal grant application, so their increase would be the 10% of the city's cost for that grant. Central Garage had an increase in fuel, as well as insurance for vehicles. Administrative services had increase again for technology, which is like your Office 365 cost, your annual OMC, which is our IT, their contractor, their maintenance costs, and then credit card fees also increased. So with all that being said, what questions do you have regarding that information, or would you like to hear from the departments heads on their opinions of option 1 or option 2? I know this motion doesn't have, this item doesn't have a motion, so we're looking for guidance from council regarding option 1 and option 2. So I saw you nodding your head, so if you want to hear from any department heads.
Do you have any thoughts? Option 1, option 2?
I don't care for option 2 because it just sets back our department even further. The whole reason for the Hansen study was to get city departments in line with other competing agencies. And the police department was a big part of the general fund. we are that far behind. The city has been trying very hard to get us caught up, but we have been, when I started, I think my salary was $27,000 a year. And so we were grossly behind, and so it's taken time to build it up. So we don't make money. We're not supposed to. If we're a police department that's out there trying to make money, we're doing something wrong. But we are a required service. And this really, I think if you're treating the city staff as a whole, they shall be treated fairly equally.
Anyone else have any thoughts? For department head?
I don't think anybody loves either option, but I think we're trying to just be fiscally responsible for you guys and try to make it smooth as we can. I think I was one of the first people that said I don't envy Brian or Melissa for being in the positions that they are trying to do these changes, but I support option 2. Obviously, the ambulance gets less than what we were all hoping for. But we also are looking for sustainability for the future too. And we just felt like this was probably a little bit more of a safe route for the moment.
Just to piggyback off of what Brad said, that's absolutely correct. I mean, both options. The Hinson study was to bring us closer and try to close that gap, and that's 100%. There is risk to that too, because we don't know what legislation is going to do each coming fiscal year, and likely our revenues aren't going to be increasing, or at least increasing, significantly. So we would have to also understand, we could pass it this budget. We don't know what next budget or the budget after that, may look like. So I feel like everything would be on the table as far as wage freeze or,
Right.
a minimum
my question.
increase. Or,
That's my concern.
So the question is, if option 1 would be okay, is everyone okay with the potential of 0 increase next year or the year after, just depending on the wages? Because we don't know. I mean, this is a very far prediction for the next budget. You're looking 6 to 18 months in advance. Who knows what the next 2 or 3 years are like? So it's hard to know. They both have pros and cons. So I guess it's just, what is everyone comfortable with moving forward?
So option 2, I just want to make sure that I understand this from in the long term, especially when it comes to salaries, is the safer option
Yes.
with future potential pay increases.
Yes.
Because if we go with 1, there's an opportunity for the unknown
Right.
and the possibility that they wouldn't get or
Right.
significantly lower or potentially no pay increases at all
Yes,
if we went with
because
option 1.
You're starting at a higher
Okay.
place. So.
Okay.
They're
Just want to make sure I have that clear in my.
So 2 is 5% across the board, correct?
5%, yes.
So everybody's still,
When,
Behind.
as far as graduating, they're gonna try to, but ambulance and, police and fire, they're at a slower pace as far as getting up, correct?
Ambulance and police had an
Ambulance.
accelerated scale that would not be observed in option 2 because the acceleration of that would defeat the 5% overall, and it would throw it right back to option 1. So they would look identical if you have the accelerated scale in option 2 for the general fund.
And that was my point is, I don't think either one of them knew. So in option 2, if you're going to take out a couple departments that don't get the accelerated scale, why not say, okay, the city as a whole is doing a 5% increase, and then we can look at next year to see if that works. When you start taking out departments, and there was concerns that other departments would feel like they would be resentful to the departments that they get the accelerated scale. Yeah, it's human nature. If departments are singled out there, well, no, you don't get it. We're already one of the departments that are so far behind. That's why the increase is so big.
The ones that are looked at to keep the accelerated scale are enterprise funds. They're not in the general fund. they were sort of the ones that we began with that had recruitment and retention problems, namely the electric utility group was the major one. You remember how difficult it's been to find journeymen and find apprentices. So the question, it depends on how you want to look at it. You could look at, you can afford to help some, but not everyone. Or because you can't help everyone, you help no one. This option 2 helps the ones we can, but unfortunately not everyone. So, that's one of those choices that you have to make as elected people.
I would assume also, once in a while I say something nice and intelligent. I would assume next year if we saw drastic changes to the tax legislation, we would all be optimistic to seeing this come back if there's an opportunity to change this and make it better. It's a tough situation to be in.
I really wanted the accelerated scale for the police. I really did. And I said at one of the department head meetings, I wasn't ready to give up on it. Well, it isn't completely given up on, it is option 1. But I go back to what Brad said and Melissa said. I don't know how sustainable it is. The legislature has tinkered around with property taxes for the last few years, and they're doing it again now. There's a phase out of some of our revenue that we're getting now. So that is getting smaller. The thing about, and Melissa mentioned it some, the thing about option 2, it has a surplus currently of around 118,000. Well, that's been able to help some departments. In the case of the police, we put extra funding into the police garage and knocked off about 4 years from the due date for when we were looking at funding it for. Instead of borrowing 30,000 for, was it radios? No, in the police, there was there was 30,000 for radios that they were looking at paying for and like a loan. Well, this would fund it up front. In the library, as Melissa mentioned, there are a couple of key pieces, the roof and the boiler, that would have otherwise been borrowed rather than funded up front. So I was looking at that 118,000 as something to use now, but something that might be a bit of cushion next year. So I really wanted to have the Hinson study. I'm just concerned that it won't work. I'm concerned about sustainability year to year.
I'm gonna ask, and maybe I should know this already, what is the current starting salary for the police department? For a brand new officer in? Do we know kind of what that?
Don't know off the hand.
Sorry, I didn't know if you would know that or not, or.
If I had to kind of remember looking at some salaries, the last time I remembered was maybe about 51 to 54,000.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I wasn't advocating for my officers in my department.
Absolutely.
They can go to the sheriff's office and start at $79,000.
Sure.
They don't even have to move. The radios are already paid for through the
It was
county.
the body cameras,
Oh, body
car
cameras, I'm
cameras
sorry.
and body cameras,
Not
yes.
I'm sorry.
No,
The garage we've been working on for many years, I I believe we're the only department that has never had a garage, but our vehicles have the highest idle hours. And Clay has been advocating for us to get something like this. First of all, I have to find somebody that will build it. They'll give me an estimate and then build it. But I'm still always going to advocate for my officers. We work 24/7, 365, dealing with people at the worst. So I want the city to be sustainable. I also feel that when you're picking and choosing, you start downgrading in somebody else's eyes that their job isn't as important. So I will always advocate. They deserve compensation.
Do you think they'd be okay if it was passed through as option one, and then next year, things, you know, revenues don't come in like they should, would they be okay
Not getting anything.
not getting anything?
If there was a freeze?
Because they were bumped up to be more competitive? Or would the expectation to be continue to?
I think it would show that everybody in the city is equal. That there's not this picking and choosing, that just, we come from the general fund because we don't bring revenue in. So they're not worthy of getting a raise.
Well, but
Or
that's not,
accelerated scale.
okay, because everyone is getting a raise.
No,
So
I get
if there
that.
wasn't picking or choosing, everyone's getting a raise.
Yes.
It's just, what is that raise?
The
It's
accelerated
on the
scale.
table. Yes.
Because through the Henson study, which was requested by other departments, not us, we were like, well, yeah. The police department, again, has been so underpaid that, and the accelerated scale is one of those things that's just part of law enforcement. I can't speak for them, but that's the general feeling is, why are we not getting the accelerated scale?
Obviously, I am also a government, right? I'm paid from government money. Like I feel like I really feel the where you're at and where everyone kind of out there. That's why, like, definitely anyone else too who has thoughts on this. Like, it's wages are hard, and obviously I think people should get as much as they should get. You know, they deserve. So, any other departments? I mean, other feelings? I know we kind of heard from Lisa and Brad, but
Or feelings you've heard within your departments, any staff,
yes,
you know,
your-
you've
your
all gone and
employees.
spoke to your departments. Does anyone have any comments from those departments?
Well, I think in our department, and I want to say Brian Brennan is in our department. He's kind of his own department, but we work together every day. And he's been below, he's got about 30 years of experience, and he's a good one, and he can do it all, and he's not even to midpoint on the Henson study. So I think he's at 3 or 4 or something. I know that he's not at midpoint, and I think 5% works for us. I understand Lisa's position. Obviously, that's a valid argument. I would advocate for Brian, though, as a separate kind of situation in public works or in water wastewater.
How big of an impact would option one be as far as the financial?
Option one is doable. Both options are doable. The risk is more in option one, and that's what we're trying to just,
Well, you can't guarantee what happens tomorrow.
you
That's
can't
all you're
guarantee
talking
what
about.
happens in the future, right?
Today is what they're talking about.
Yes, yes,
So would they be happy today, making more money, and tomorrow?
that's the question. Right,
Good question.
I mean,
right.
I feel
myself,
like I'm hearing that, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm feeling like I'm hearing that they would be. But until next year happens.
Well, right, or the
That's
next
what
year
happens.
after that happens. I mean, there's a potential that it could go 2 years with no
Yeah,
pay increases.
And you don't know where as far as counties go.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, part of it is being a department that is has been so underfunded and trying to get us caught up. And then now we know you're not gonna get that accelerated scale, but other departments are. That's probably the biggest, punch in the gut to the guys. Is we're already way behind. We are still trying to catch up from the last, and we appreciate, they have said, they appreciate raises, but we're never gonna get caught up. We're very far behind. And it's, you know, you could go statewide and you could go anywhere in this state right now and you get hired somewhere. If you're a certified officer, you're probably gonna get a $10,000 sign-on bonus or a $5,000 sign-on bonus. That's what we're up against.
How big would the Henson be for you as far as, you have an idea?
I don't know it's different for each level.
But the police is the major impact. I think the general fund was $90,000 of an impact, and police was probably 90% of that. There was
That was like 180,000 and we were like 90,000 of the
general fund. You were significant because the only other employees that are specifically out of the general fund is ambulance, aquatic center, park and rec, library, and economic development. Otherwise, our salaries are percentaged amongst water, wastewater, because we serve, we support everyone, so we're percentaged amongst everyone. So general fund is by far had the biggest impact. And the reason we felt like we had to be transparent and bring two options is because we needed to be fiscally responsible, whether, not saying one is right or wrong, and there wasn't an intention of trying to gut punch anyone, but I also couldn't just bring you option one and say, it'll work, because it will work, but I don't know what next year is. So I had to show two options, and that was the fairest second option that I could provide, was a 5% across the board without an accelerated scale, because that blew it out of the water. It defeated the point. So that was the only other option that was fair, because we had looked at another option where everyone else got the Hinson study except the general fund. And we knew that that probably wasn't, that was going to create harsh feelings too. And that's understandable. So this at least was a pay raise for everyone, which is something that we've had, but accelerated scales don't work. And I understand that too. And I understand option one. I'm just concerned of what next year will look like and how people will accept that. I think it's great if knowing that next year it may be a freeze.
I think my guys have, without a doubt, been excited about doing an accelerated wage scale. Just like Lisa said, the guys are behind. They work their other jobs. They start at $8 to $10 more an hour. I think my fear would be if we started them on this, they'd get really excited. And if the next year we said we're going to do nothing. I already know how difficult it is to keep employees. But if I came back next year and said we valued last year pretty heavily, and this year, I'm sorry, you're out. I feel really confident in saying that we would lose them just as quick, if not quicker, than where they're at. The tough thing is, the market's adjusting. In public safety, probably more aggressively now this year than we've ever seen it historically. And like Lisa said, we have some guys that are behind. There's no doubt about it. I'm just really concerned about next year. I don't want to be talking next year about budget cuts that are so significant. We're also talking about staff cuts that we can't afford.
If the goal is to be equal, I don't know that that's truly possible. Different jobs make different amounts per hour, and they compare themselves to each other now. And if there is basically one general fund that has an accelerated scale, would that not cause conflict within the general fund? So, I don't know that you can ever get equal. I know what you're saying. And again, I really wanted to make the Hinson study work because I do think, I don't want to lose people. But I'm just concerned. I mean, we know the legislature, when we started doing this, the legislature wasn't tinkering as much as it has been now. And that's what concerns me. I just don't think they're gonna be done to where things stabilize for us. And I'm sorry about that.
And the study was done comparing municipalities of the same size,
Yeah.
population-wise.
It was, so it does show that, yeah.
And there were one or two
Yeah.
examples. You know, I told Hinson, I'd like to be competitive, but I wanted him to aim high. Meaning I didn't want to be the average. I wanted to be a bit higher. And there were some comparisons made to Coralville and I think Mid-American and North Liberty. And so we were trying to get it to where we would be more competitive. That was our hope.
And that's what his recommendations are based off of, is to close that gap.
And he did make recommendations about where the placement of Brian Brennan could be.
In that option.
That Hinson, was that, were you at full scale, that option one is the full scale of Hinson?
Yes.
What if you tiered that back a little bit, that'd still be above the 5%, correct?
Well, it could be, yeah, it can be reduced
I
to
mean,
whatever percentage.
I mean, I'm just saying, the 5% is straight across the board,
Mhm.
you know, that would be what, $2,500 a year, basically, you're saying it's starting salary of 51,000. That's just, you know, at 5% almost.
I think the thing that's, for the general fund, that's hard, is the accelerated scale. That's kind of the thing that is throwing it. So if you implement that in the general fund, as it was made to do, you're gonna increase the wages up to the option one wages for those specific departments, for police and ambulance, and that's gonna bring it right back to option one.
But I mean, you have to go the full Hinson scale, or can you draw back a little bit, roll across the board?
We would be in option two, we'd still adopt his scales and his recommendations. It would just be at our current wages plus 5%. So looking, when I compared what that was compared to what his was, it was about a step and a half back from where he had in place.
What is our lowest percent increase in option one? Is it 5%? 5% is the lowest?
Yeah.
And the highest percent increase, what did that come out to?
I don't know.
You don't know that, okay. I know as we're getting ready to talk about pay in my own world, and as Tipton's enrollment goes down and the money available to us from the state goes down, and we have to sit there and talk about budget things, and I have to sit in a room like our department heads here do, and I have to advocate for all the teaching staff, I really don't know. I mean, more money in the pocket now, we know we have it then. Going forward, I mean, the future is unknown. Like it really is a struggle on that idea of, do we go with what we know we can get now, the chances that it might not come next year, or do we hold back hoping that we can get there next year? I mean, because they could still go down again. We could still, even if we go with the 5% this year, we could come back later, and if there's, I just don't know, it's hard. It is really hard.
Well, and I will say that the department heads have been fantastic in also reducing operating expenses too. There's no cushion in there, and they've been great at looking at what they can reduce and what they can cut, and they've done it multiple times, and that's been extremely helpful because we did start with a much higher deficit, and I've told a couple of you this was the fourth version that we've had because we've gone back and gone back and gone back to where it is now. So they've done a great job of, making it to where it is. So I appreciate all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll second that too. They've really been diligent in trying to make this work.
I think Denise had something.
I wasn't going to say anything because I normally don't say anything, but my board has been very, very good through this whole process with all of the legislature and all of that that's trying to go down. And then with the Hinson study, my salary isn't even on that scale. And my board came to me, we talked, and my board decided that I was gonna get a 5% increase. And then, next year, if something happened, we would gradually get to where I should be. I'll probably never see that, just because I've got about 6 years. But I took that, and my board took that as a sacrifice for us, so that we could help the other departments, and that we would be able to keep our staff and the services that the library provides. So I wanted to give my board kudos to that, because they've really worked hard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll just, Melissa and I, we've had a couple conversations and y'all know that I'm also a government employee, I'm a federal government employee. And, we're usually lucky to get 1.5%. So, I think, but I think the concern with all of us is legislative changes. I mean, the federal budgets even affect municipalities down the line to a certain degree. And, with hundreds of thousands of dollars being cuts from federal budgets, my concern is, having to freeze salaries for not 1 or 2, maybe even 3 years, because I don't see anything looking any better from a federal budget perspective for the next 5 years, if I'm being honest. And so I think that's just something that I've been thinking of is, I get it, which is why I asked, what the comparison study was with as far as municipality comparison, to make sure that we're not, competing with, Minneapolis or something, that was a fair comparison. And while, I agree, I think, either budget is probably doable, but, I would be concerned about, some getting significant pay increases, and then for the next 3 years, they're still kind of behind because we're not able to give them pay increases, moving forward.
But the Henson study was gonna give them a major increase.
It was going to close that gap.
Yeah.
Between
Yeah.
municipalities.
But I think to a certain degree, in reality, to a certain degree, everybody expects a raise every year, right? To a certain degree.
Yeah.
So I think that would just need to be communicated, pretty clearly with the departments. If we went with option 1 and they got this big jump, that, there's the potential that they're not going to get a jump of any kind. I don't want to be the negative Nelly, but that's the reality of potentially.
I mean, as far as the gap.
Right.
They're more than
Right.
3 years behind
They're
right
making more
now.
money,
Right.
even at that point.
And that's just transparency, we don't know what the
Right.
future holds, so.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
feel hard to do.
Yeah.
So I know there's not official action, but I do need some type of guidance on what council's recommendation is, because I will have to prepare the budget then for your February 26th meeting. I have to put in the levy information, which is based off of option 1 or option 2. So we don't need a vote, but I do need some type of guidance on what you're thinking.
Was there anyone else who wanted to weigh in that hasn't yet?
What do you think back there? You're awful quiet down.
Come on, speak.
John, speak. What do you got?
Me?
John.
Sure.
John, I was gonna say.
What are you saying, John?
I have skin in the game. Yeah, like I said, you guys aren't a tough spot. I mean, we've done a lot of work. I mean, throughout the entire thing with CIP, but budgeting is a tough spot. Yeah, I don't know, if we do option 1 and there's a freeze, then we're all back to square 1 and we might catch up again. We do option 2 and there's still a freeze. We're all still in the same spot. I mean, it could happen. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's tough.
So Melissa, do you feel like if the council, made the decision for option 2 and everybody got 5%, that there is, even if with, additional federal budget cuts, is there still an opportunity for them to have 3% next year?
I think
Instead of making, having these big, closing the gap, so to speak, or those larger gaps, if we went with 5% across the board, and then there's the potential for them to have, I don't know, just throwing 3% out there, or something.
So the Hinson study has the recommendation based off of the Bureau of Labor Statistics of
Yeah.
what the cost of, what am I going for?
Cost of living.
Cost of living,
That's
yes,
right.
of what that average
Yeah.
is. So in prior years, the recommendation for the wage increase is based off of that, and it couldn't be below 0 and it couldn't be above 5%. So that would still be in play, but that always is a recommendation, and it's always based off of how that works into a budget. So it's still gonna be there, it's just how does it work in a budget? What expenses do we have, that
Right.
we have to have, and, costs of things, if they've gone up, if they've gone down, we don't know.
So what if you scale back the Hinson, like 75% of the Hinson, what would that be at?
I don't know.
I mean, it'd still be more than 5% creep.
It probably would be. I think the question then is, how does the accelerated scale fit in? That's really the thing that tips it to not workable, because it throws wages significantly higher for those departments in the general fund.
Myself, I'm almost steering towards making them happy right now and deal with next year with what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's just transparency. Everyone have to go back to the
Yeah,
departments
if they're all
and say,
aware of
this is,
that, what happens, it's not out of our hands.
we don't know what next year will bring, and that's, this budget's planning
The
far ahead,
5%
so.
and somebody not getting, somebody else getting graduated, I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
slapping faces for a few departments.
Are any of our departments like right at the same pay scale as people around us, or are we kind of low everywhere across the board?
Well, we didn't have, cost of living the last 2 years was higher than what we got. We got 5%, I think it was 8 and 9% for 2 years in a row. So that
We
is,
know.
this study was trying to catch us up,
Right.
to those years, because we did just have the Hinson study, what is it, it's been 4 years
Yeah.
or so ago. So
Yeah, it was
he
right
did
before
a
COVID.
revision, a full scale revision, and did the job descriptions and everything. So that brought us there, but then we had COVID and it shut us down, and, things went through the roof. So we're kind of catching up from that, and that's where he's placed us based off of that. And option 1 just has to be completely transparent that it's year 1 and only 1 year. It's not a guarantee. And that's with every budget. It's not guaranteed because you don't know what's coming.
Right.
But I feel option 1 would not make certain departments upset. It would get everybody on the same scale.
The other thing in defense for PD and ambulance, in law enforcement specifically, we see people retire after 25 years because their life expectancy is less. The concept of being on a 30-year scale where if you retire on it, you take your top, the best 5, not the last 2. They will never actually realize their full potential in it because they have retired 5 years early. There is, a lot to be appreciated in that. But the other tough side though about the Hinson study is we don't really see maximum wages hit us for year 5, year 6. And then it starts getting something, but it's nice to see some progressive steps on it. But I think to reiterate what Brian and Melissa say, there's also a concept of sustainability of the market and of the organization. There's a lot of concern on that, including from public safety. How do we make sure that we don't work ourselves out of a job that we're just not affordable at?
Does any other council members have any thoughts?
Economically speaking, we're in a really poor environment. And it's getting worse, not better. I'm seeing a lot of that in, I'm not in a government job.
The private sector's not any better.
It's really bad, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's affected us drastically already, and this is February. And what we were told, we have some big companies that we work with, like Caterpillar Tractor, for example, which is massive. And what they projected for us at the end of last year to what they're projecting for us now within just 2 months' time is astronomical, the downturn. I mean, it's baffling. I mean, we went from potentially purchasing a $1 million machine to saying, I don't even know if we're gonna be able to keep our employees. And that is not an exaggeration. It's genuinely, I mean, we cut back all of our overtime already, which we're an overtime shop. That's what we do. We work 50 hours a week. And it's just, I don't know. So this is hard for me, I guess is what I'm saying.
So any thoughts on direction for Melissa? I'll just ask for her because I know that's what she's like, hello.
Well,
Yeah.
I gave my point.
Truthfully, I think option 2, as much as I don't want it.
I'll be honest, I'm leaning towards 1 myself, because I sit in the shoes, I feel it. You know, the thing that for me is just making sure, like, I want the city employees to be aware. And I think the department heads have been doing a good job of talking to their staff, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, knowing that, we're gonna give them I like to give them what we can,
When you can.
knowing that it might not be there going forward. And as long as our employees are overwhelmingly good with that, then that's the direction that I'm sitting, but
And that makes sense
Be up
too.
be up to them to make them aware of, this.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be just a message of transparency,
Absolutely.
that they understand that if we do option 1, that
Year 1.
What about the members who aren't here, did they say?
George said he will go with what, he respects my opinion, and he would base it off of that, so he would be okay with both options. And I gave Jason the 2 options as well, and he thought economically, fiscally responsibly, option 2 was.
and that's the direction I would tend to go. I mean, I understand both points, or both options, and the risks and the potentials with both options. But I think from a fiscal responsibility, to me, it seems like option 2 is the right option. But it's a hard decision to make. I just have a fear, I guess, of some of the employees, who maybe aren't going to get a raise or as much of a raise, or, I mean, you know how it is with employees. I mean, they all talk. So, I think there's just going to really have to be that clear message, regardless of what we do. I mean.
So I'm going to take that I'm hearing option 1 with very much clear transparency to all employees that it is a 1-year thing, and it'll have to be fully evaluated and possibly changed next year. Is that a correct assumption?
That's where I'm at.
I'm sitting 2. Or also, I should say, sitting also, so we don't confuse it. Option 1 also.
You're 2. You're 2.
I just want to make sure, I just want for myself, this retention as far as employees and trying to keep them.
Are we right? I mean, have we discussed this with our departments a little bit, or I'm assuming there's been talk, they're aware of the options,
No, yeah.
and
What are their thoughts?
Well, we came as department heads and talked with Brian and Melissa. I mean, we all
That's
came up
good.
with these options.
that's great. I mean,
So-
But have you
It is aware.
communicated to your employees?
but as your employees, are they indifferent, or do they have? I mean, I get it. Everyone wants to make more money, right? Like
I think you're getting different opinions on which departments you talk to,
sure,
because it does impact each department
differently,
Right.
My department does not want to be excluded.
Exactly.
Fair.
And like I said, I will always advocate for them. They are a great group.
Appreciate
And
that.
I'm going to do all I can to keep them.
Get a 5% this year.
See, then, like my department, either option is the same for us, but it's not.
Right,
At least.
understandable.
Would
It's a
you,
tough decision, guys.
Are we helping you? Are
would you
you?
like me to go back to Jason and George, since they weren't here, and explain our conversation and talk to them about the concerns again, to see if their thoughts are still the same, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
But I agree with you as far as making it transparent, as far as they know, we're gonna make you happy now, but we can't guarantee you.
And I think everybody understands, I mean, anybody who's worked, any portion of their adult life knows that, raises in general are not guaranteed anywhere, ever. And come in maybe at different percentages from year to year. So I wouldn't anticipate that anybody is gonna expect, a significant pay increase every year.
Right.
But, yeah, it's tough.
Then I will have a conversation with Jason and George. And then I will follow up with council on that.
Sort of the consensus and what, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yep, just lay out the consensus and we'll go with majority.
But that's-
And then
I guess
obviously
what
I
it
will
is,
follow up with department heads on what that was too. And then for your February 26th meeting, then I'll bring a resolution to approve a public hearing for April 1st.
And I think it needs to be said that we appreciate
Absolutely.
all of you, regardless of what.
I don't think they don't feel appreciated, like seriously, our conversations, all of them, I call my guys, they like their job. They do. The city is a very good place to work. As a whole, to be treated equally is very important.
Yeah.
But no, none of them, they don't want to go anywhere, but you get to a point where there's such a big difference.
Mhm.
And $10,000 difference just right off the bat, it's huge. And
Mhm.
with the county stuff, I mean, it's close to 20,000 just to go 6 more lots. That's really hard to, you can bring your dog to work.
Well, you can't argue with it. I mean,
Incentives
it's like
are-
you can't
totally,
justify it.
totally understand.
I mean, they don't want to go anywhere. But they can always be lured away, just like everybody,
Yeah. Yep.
just like everybody.
All right. Okay. Sorry. I forgot. I was like, what's next? So moving on, the next thing on the agenda is just mayor, department head, city manager reports. Anybody have anything? I do not either. No? No? Okay. All right, then adjournment. I need a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Okay, motion by Johnston, seconded by Cummins.
Helm,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Cummins.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.